and welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your Literary Hype Woman, and today I'm getting some answers. I got the opportunity to be part of a press conference involving some people from SAG-AFTRA and NAVA, talking about the strikes that are ongoing in Hollywood and AI from a performer's perspective. So there's a lot of really great information that answers a lot of questions that a lot of us have, like including cosplay and like what influencers can and cannot say regarding the strikes or do. Like there's a lot of details in here and how it can affect you beyond just not having the shows you want to watch this fall. So without any further ado, here is the press conference from San Diego Comic-Con with some representatives of SAG-AFTRA and NAVA.
Can all of you talk about some of the abuses that have gone on in the voiceover world when it comes to AI and what you're seeking to protect in this new negotiation?
That's a great, very large question. I can talk to some of that, and then I think Zeke can add, and Tim, obviously Ashley as well. So one of the things that we've been seeing that is disconcerting but very public is the use of fan mods. Let me first say, most importantly, we love our fans. We would not be here if it were not for the fandoms. We are grateful every single day for the people that like our work. But there is a tendency, or I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, a community where people will take the voices that are publicly available, rip them, create their own AI versions of them, and have them say whatever they want. In some instances, it can be cheeky. In some instances, it can be very hurtful. There are a lot of things that are defamatory, NSFW, and you know, as someone who makes my living with this little 2-inch spot on my face, it's incredibly harmful. If I don't have the ability to control what my voice says, and especially if people can't tell whether it's fake or not, it has the potential to do massive harm to me financially, personally. Also, I have children. There are things I don't want my voice to say and have my children hear it and question if that is something that I have actually said. I understand the fun of it. I understand why people think it's interesting. I really do, but I would ask with my entire soul that they put themselves in our shoes and look at something that they love wholly. We don't do this job because we get rich. We do this job because we love it. I would ask that people think about something that they love having taken without their consent and used in ways that they do not approve of, and how harmful that can be.
Did not rehire them because they said, we have 3 years of your voice. We're just going to create an AI synthetic voice out of what you already have. As far as for those actors, the contracts they had did not protect them in this case. And trying to find some aspect to put into these contracts to allow very specifically consent control and compensation for the voice actors when it comes to the use of AI and synthetic voices.
Zeke, did you have something to add to that?
Sure.
I see him furiously taking notes.
Let's be clear. Pandora's box is open, and we're not against the use of artificial intelligence systems, if you want to call them that. They're not artificial intelligence systems. They are focused algorithms that do really, really good things. So in broad speaking, if you're not familiar, the concepts of narrow AI, general AI, and super AI, we're not talking about general or super. We're not talking about Terminator 2 and, you know, that conversation is out there. That's not the conversation we're having. We're talking about narrow AI systems, systems that do a specific task better than a human can. For example, something that needs to read the New York Times as it is printed every day in the morning in every language for people across the world. Humans can't do that. But that's a really good use of the technology. We're not against that. We recognize that. What we're interested in is consent and compensation of the people that are being used. So if you're going to replicate me or any other performer, we should consent to that, and then we should be compensated for the use of what makes us money. Furthermore, there is the concept of these large algorithmic machines that generate things. Well, they don't generate anything new. They scour the landscape of the internet and take things and then mix them up in a jumble and run the algorithm over them and spit something else out. That machine there needs to be some transparency in the world of what it's taking up, because it just doesn't affect us as actors or voice actors or on-camera actors. It affects the entire labor force. CPAs, paralegals, radiology technicians. All right, if we can't see into the machine, then we have no idea whose work and whose life's work and training is being taken for free without consent and compensation and turned into something that makes money for a billionaire sitting somewhere at a retreat. So that's why this is important to us.
Linsay, can I add just a word
Yeah,
to
go
that?
for it,
I think,
Duncan.
what Zeke said is so right, and I just want to say, consent really has to mean informed consent, because one of the things that's so typical in this industry, large industry, video games, film, television, all of it, is this idea that you can sort of lawyer things in a way where consent is buried in some sentence in the middle of a 12-page contract, and it doesn't really mean anything. And so when we're fighting for consent, we're fighting for informed consent, meaning that the performer needs to understand exactly what's going to be done with any kind of digital replica of their voice or their face or their body or whatever. It has to be real consent. It can't be this sort of sham of consent that's been sort of embedded into the industry. And I think the actors that you see on this panel are at the forefront of this, because the truth is that this for technical reasons, this is happening more quickly with voice acting than it is in any other field. And so it is absolutely essential that people really hear what the folks on this panel are saying about the necessity to have this kind of consent, informed consent, fair compensation, et cetera. I think that no one should think that there's any less resolve amongst the voice actor community, the video game actor community, than there is in the actor community in film, television, streaming, or anywhere else. Our members, our actors doing all of this type of work are equally concerned about the impact of these technologies on their work lives, and they are standing just as strong.
Yeah, and Ashley, you're also here as a SAG-AFTRA member, but also a WGA member. So how is that going to impact your work as a writer?
AI and the development of AI, I think, is an existential threat in general, especially to, I would say, entry-level creatives. And that, to me, is such a huge part of this fight. It is about protecting people that are new to the industries that they're trying to enter, that don't have the support or clout to be able to defend themselves when there are predatory contracts. And that's a big thing across, I would say, all of the unions right now and all of the negotiations, is that we're trying to protect the people that are at these lower levels that are trying to rise up in their career. Because especially when it comes to voiceover, a lot of these roles that you're seeing that people would like to replace AI with are entry level. I mean, some of our most beloved actors in this field have come up doing that kind of work. And so when the right for fledgling actors to be able to engage with this kind of work isn't protected, and when companies are allowed to be predatory to those people, and that they don't have the sort of guidance or the sort of knowledge or the protection from a legal standpoint to have their work protected, then their career could be over before it even begins. Yeah. And it's the same thing for writers. Like Zeke said, these are tools. They're very effective tools when in the hands of creatives. And it's the exact same thing for writers. It breaks my heart to talk to WGA members who are staff writers that cannot afford to make rent, and they're working on these massive TV shows, and that producers have no empathy in terms of the threat that AI has to their profession. So it's existential across the entire board, and I think in particular to the most vulnerable members of our unions.
Another question. Yes, here.
Just so that everyone's on the same page, this is kind of a strike-adjacent question, but what was the proposal that SAG made towards protections against AI in the recent proposal that's being proposed? Just so
Sure, let me just say that for our negotiations on the interactive agreement, which is the video games agreement, are still ongoing, and we don't talk about the details of proposals in ongoing negotiations. As you know, we released details on our proposals in the film, television, and streaming negotiations after we went on strike in those in those contracts. And so what I can say is that the themes of our interest are the same regardless of the contract, right? Those have already been mentioned: informed consent, fair compensation, also appropriate limitations on the use of generative AI tools and the training of those generative AI models using the work of our members, and also limitations on the use of completely synthesized voices and performances. And by that I mean, when I say synthesized, what I'm referring to is performances that are created entirely from amalgamations of other people's voices or faces, et cetera, so that you can't visually or auditorily recognize them, but they are in fact amalgamated in that way. And so we don't want to see human artistry replaced by that type of synthetic creation. And so those are sort of the 4 key points of or themes of our proposal in the film, television, and streaming contract. And I think people can expect that those are the protections and issues that our members are committed to across all of our contracts. And that's what we will be fighting for, to make sure that AI doesn't overtake the human element of creativity.
Over here, yeah.
Hi, Cissy from Lucy Magazine. I totally understand the 4 key points. I have a question regarding the localization process, because everybody is really defending the main original voice and the main creative work. But in the globalization principle right now, localization is really targeted by the AI. Is that something that you are working on, or no?
Well, if that's directed to me, I would just say we are working on it in the sense that if localization is going to be done using the voice of the original performer, using AI tools and technologies, that also requires informed consent and fair compensation. And so I expect that there will be more of that, because technology is going to make that more feasible. But I think it's also important that, since people make a living doing that work now, that it is important that if that is to be done, that the fair compensation structure is maintained, so there's not an economic incentive for companies to use that methodology instead of using voice performers to do that work. We have at least one example of a company that that's using AI tools to do localization services, who've committed to using voice actors to do that work rather than using synthesized voices. And so that's something that we definitely, I'm sure everybody on this panel wants to encourage that as a responsible use of artificial intelligence technology.
Yeah, because I know a lot of us up here do dubbing work. We do localized video games. Tim, I think you can probably talk to this.
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. NAVA is also one of the founding members of United Voice Artists, which is an 18-nation, 32 association coalition, primarily based in the UK. We have Les Voix, France, Spain, Germany, and they're concerned because their voice actors are celebrities in those countries the same way that they are here. And which is very interesting. Actually, to this note, I received a message from the German coalition saying that their actress Dagmar Dempe just won a Lifetime Achievement Award for her work as the voice of Meryl Streep. And so this, when it's a global threat, it's outside of just the United States, and it affects all the artists who are working in the voiceover industry globally. And so we're working with that right now to help get protections in the EU AI Act, very specifically for voice. We're working with FIA to help get that in place. We're also working to advocate for all the associations around the world. We're working very closely with Nigeria and Kenya with their dubbing actors who are there. Because what happens, voiceover is a global industry. Voiceover, we do not work the same way that on-screen actors work. Any given day, I can be working with a producer in New York, the director in Canada, and the company in Sweden. And so whose laws do we fall under? Whose protections do we have? And how can we help all of those people in those various different countries be safe and safeguard their ability to keep working? So it is global, and dubbing is gigantic. Dubbing is huge in all these other countries. These celebrities, these voice actors are celebrities the same way that we view the celebrities in the United States, and it's important that we protect all of them.
How do you handle the concerns of those companies who essentially, in their terms of use, bury we can do whatever we want with whatever you post forever and ever? And so how is that kind of
Well, I think probably all of us can agree that those terms are all overreaching, and some of that can be addressed through collective bargaining. Some of that has to be addressed through public policy and other methods. I think anyone who's watched Jonah's Awful, the first episode of the current Black Mirror season on Netflix, can imagine a world that not too far off from where we are today, where that kind of abuse affects everyone. And I think that's one of the reasons why what people are saying here really resonates with the public so much, because I think everyone is concerned about having having elements of their personal life or their persona, maybe their face, taken and used without real informed consent. So I personally think, I think institutionally we favor the idea of our culture moving more towards a model of informed consent, where people actually know what it is they are agreeing to when they agree to something, and not having huge corporations take advantage of you with these take it or leave it contracts with important terms buried in the middle of it. People think that only happens in an online click wrap environment, but that happens in Hollywood every single day with personal service agreements that are chock full of boilerplate provisions that the actual person doesn't know what they are, what they mean, and that's really not right.
Zeke, did you have anything to add to that? Okay, next question. Yeah, right there.
So that's what informed consent is not. It's a boilerplate across the board. What does informed consent look like? Is it very, very narrow?
Well, it could be narrow, or it could just be fully explained. I mean, really what it means is fully explained. So, for example, the previous questioner mentioned the idea of promotional activities. So it's understood when an actor, a voice actor or any type of actor, agrees to work on a project, that there are certain promotional activities that are going to be part of that. Those aren't necessarily listed out in terms of dates, times, or exact platforms that's going to be, but there is a understanding of what the scope and nature of that, or there should be an understanding of what the scope and nature of that promotional activity is. And same thing, if you're going to create a digital replica of a performer for the purpose of, say, reducing vocal stress, let's say there's going to be some specific vocalizations that are needed, and a digital replica of the performer's voice could be used to help that. That could be informed, they could be discussed, they could know exactly that's what's going to be done with that digital replica, and that's great. What's not great is a line that says, we're going to create a digital replica of your voice, and we have the right to use it in perpetuity throughout the universe for any purpose we desire, period. That's not informed consent, because it doesn't tell you anything about what they're going to do with it. And so really it's fundamentally about, you can't consent to something meaningfully if you don't even know what it is or what it's going to be. So it's a fair description of that intended use.
I would also like to say that some of the contracts, in addition to what Duncan just said, will also say any technology existing now or in the future.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a new provision.
Yeah, they're in the back.
Can I just get clarification on the position of voice actors with regards to the ongoing strike? Obviously, we have voice actors talking to panels here. I know you mentioned it's a separate contract. Is there a timeline where they could become part of the strike? Just what is the situation?
Well, voice of those of us who are SAG-AFTRA members are part of the strike.
Yep.
We are, if we're working under those contracts or we're working in those contracts, we are not currently working under those contracts, so we are supporting the strike actively. Our voice actors are members of SAG-AFTRA and are out on the picket line, and we are here under the same rules and terms as everybody else in the strike.
Well, Zeke, you can also, there is some voiceover work that is part of the TV theatrical contract that is being struck right now. You might want to elaborate on that, Zeke.
SAG-AFTRA has, I don't know what the number of contracts is. It's a lot. It's in the hundreds. We're striking one of them. It happens to be the largest one. So we're not currently striking interactive, so voice actors can work in games. But we have to understand that what we do here echoes through eternity, is what happens in this strike is going to impact not only the acting profession, but every profession. But specific to the acting profession, an actor is an actor is an actor. So if we are not protected at the end of this strike in this contract, we're not protected in any contract. And we can watch this all go away.
And right now, voiceover actors who work in looping and ADR, that is currently struck. So any of those voices that add to background actors. Trailers are struck, and feature film animation. So we as voice actors are being impacted right now with this current contract. Yes, right there.
For those people who are saying, and it's a minority of people, I think, but for those who are saying, well, this is the future,
AI is the future. We have to accept it. It's like fighting the internet or a phone where you can look up all information. What is your response to this? You're like, listen, this is the future. We have to accept it. What is your response to this?
I would say it's not an inevitability. It is the future. And currently, right now, we feel like we don't have a voice in that future development, and that's what we want. We want to be a part of this as it goes forward. So as Zeke said, there are multiple things that could potentially be used for great things with this. So why use it to replace humans when we can use it to help us? And that's what we want to be a part of this conversation for.
Yeah, Cissy, I think you had something to add to that.
Sure. I am currently working with a company that approached me that is specifically focused on the most important issues we face as voice actors. Mostly authentic and ethical, and I do mean ethical, not just saying ethical, but being ethical in our use of AI with an actor. It's an actor-first approach, but we're still in stealth mode. There's more to come very soon, but we have to put some finishing touches on some of the more important pieces. But we are working on something that will be an ethical use of all of this.
Zeke, did you have anything to add to that?
It's going to change the world, right? I mean, we hear that a lot. We hear, NFTs are going to change the world. Whatever is the newest thing, right? But I think we all agree on this side of the table that this is one of them things. So when you look at things like the assembly line that changed the world, the internet that changed the world, that can go one way or the other. It can be a tool to allow the population to rise, or it can be a tool in the hands of the masters to bring the wealth to a single point in the 1%. And again, this is a labor force argument. There are no 1%ers in this room.
And Ashley, yeah, I was going to say you have something to add to that.
I would also say, too, that I think it's a mistake to assume also that with the integration of AI that the consumer will just win, that everything is just better if we allow AI to lead the way. I don't know if you've seen any AI-generated shows or scripts or anything, right? There is a reason that humans make art. And I think, again, as Zeke said, it's a tool, and I don't think any of us are against adapting a new technology as a tool, but it should be used in an integrative way that supports the artists that are creating this media for everyone to consume. And I just can't imagine a future in which people are going to prefer media that has no human stamp on it. So I think it's just about thinking of it in terms of how can we integrate this into the human experience rather than letting it take over.
Yeah, right there, yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Before we go on, if I may, Linsay, I just want to say, what these people on this panel are doing is really important. And to your question specifically about the inevitability of AI, the inevitability of this, people have to speak up. People have to speak out. I think we've gotten to a point in this country, and the labor movement's been a big part of it, saying people are not just going to accept whatever big corporations want to do anymore, and it's not okay that AI is implemented by, AI doesn't implement itself, AI is implemented by the voluntary decisions and choices of these big corporations, and people need to hold them accountable. These members and many others, these actors and many others are helping to do that, are helping to hold these big companies accountable. And we don't accept the premise that we just have to do whatever they say. The AI can be implemented in a human-centered way. AI can be implemented in a way that uplifts people instead of breaking them down. And I really feel like we all, actors and actually the entire society, ought to be saying, we demand that. It is not okay for these companies to just implement this however they want. This is about all of us, and we are going to say no to abusive implementations of AI.
Yeah, right there.
Hi, I'm sort of speaking to the entry level. One of the things that I've noticed very often is AI in terms of replicating different cultural groups of different ethnicities, and that sort of becoming, like, it might be fun to hear SpongeBob sing a gospel song, but like the bigger threat of like maybe less black voice actors getting, that's like a byproduct of like, digital blackface, or some might say. So like maybe you could speak to that in terms of like how that's hurting the diversification of the voice acting profession.
That's a great question.
They have being able to replicate it, but without the cultural nuances, without the actual culture.
I'll start. Yeah. You're absolutely right. So a machine that just takes everything that's already out there and just jumbles it up and spits out something that's not really new is looking at all the implicit bias and institutional racism, sexism, misogyny that exists in the world and perpetuating it. So if you're looking at an algorithmic model to cast Batman, right? It's going to look at everybody who's played Batman and the numbers they made and what their current social cue is and so on and so forth, and it's going to spit out a 30 to 50-year-old white man. So again, this is why the transparency of the system is so important. Look, it's going to do a lot of cool stuff, and we want to do the cool stuff, but we have to be aware that the people that are saying cool stuff, cool stuff, cool stuff, and not preparing for the bad stuff are the people who stand to make the most money from the cool stuff and the bad stuff. So we as the public need to go, open the doors, let us see it all.
Did I see a question over here? Yeah.
Yeah, you were mentioning what we can do as consumers to hold people accountable. Can you get into more detail of what we can do, just every person here, when it comes to supporting y'all?
Love that question. Who wants to tackle that?
Some of these downloads have billions of downloads. Some of these sites have billions of downloads. Is that does damage to our ability to work. It does damage to our personal credibility if our voice is out there saying something that we can't do or wouldn't say, is to understand the damage that you're doing to the people that you're fans of. And I don't know if there's anything very tangible to do except for call people out on it when you see them posting something online, like to say, hey, this is an amazing voice that I just created for something. And say, well, did you have the active consent of the voice actor that you did that from? Are you sharing something that they wouldn't say? Or as you said, putting a voice on SpongeBob that wouldn't fit with SpongeBob is doing damage to all those voice actors that are involved. And as much as it is fun and enjoyable to do these things, and it's creative, it also does damage to the voice actors. And it's real damage that we're seeing as it dilutes our ability to make money. It dilutes the ability of all the characters that we create out in the world. Those characters become diluted if you can just get it for free. We're not going to have more of these things that we really love to engage with. These characters we love now, these games we love, they're going to disappear if people aren't able to keep making them. And we're going to lose that as fans.
Cissy, I think you had something to add to that as well.
I did, yeah. In addition to what Tim's saying, I think a week or two ago, there was a voice actress who found that her voice was being used in a mod in a very NSFW manner. And she very politely asked that people please stop using it. And she was harassed endlessly, ended up deleting her accounts. Stand up to that. Also, at the risk of sounding like I'm standing on a soapbox, call your representatives, demand laws, because the legislation is so woefully behind the technology.
Yes.
Call your reps, vote for people that actually care about this stuff, because again, we don't want it all going to the billionaires, and we know they're lobbying like hell to make sure that they get what they want. Let's make sure we get what we want too.
And I think Duncan and Zeke also have something to add to that. Did you have something?
Yeah, you go ahead. The 3 high points for us of what everyone can do is understand the approach to making this safer for the world, and that is laws, 1, contracts, 2, and transparent technology, 3.
Yeah, Duncan?
Yeah, I just want to say, as a consumer, you should know that these big companies do care about what you think. Maybe not individually, but collectively. They do. I know this for a fact because I hear about it every single day through back channels just from what's going on right now in our strike. And I think one of the things that you can really do as a consumer to help fight this battle is inform yourself about what the issues are, which obviously if you're hearing me say this, then you are doing that. And to be perfectly blunt about it, call BS on the companies just spin on these things. There's so much out there where the companies and their publicity teams and their strategic communications people are out there trying to convince the public that the sky is green, and it's not true. They're trying to convince the public that basic fairness issues can't be addressed because it's too expensive. It's not true. They're trying to convince people that they've done everything that's needed to protect people from AI. Not true. They have not, and they are not willing at this moment to do what's necessary to protect not only these actors but also the public from their implementations of AI. And so if you inform yourself and you call BS on these things, that actually is incredibly helpful because they do care about shareholder value and they do care about the bottom line, and they definitely care about consumers turning away from the things that generate revenue from them. And so you have immense power if you just inform yourself and don't let that spin confuse you.
Can I add one more thing as well, which is to that end, I think a big part of that is also speaking to peers. So to get a critical mass of people that are willing to speak to companies or stand up to companies also requires grassroots connections with people in your community. And so, to the end of your previous question, if people are saying, well, AI is an inevitability, talk to them about that, confront them about that, ask them why they think that, present counterpoints. I mean, this really is a situation where we need to reach a critical mass of people that are informed about this, and I think that happens more effectively in one-on-one conversations with people that you actually know versus doing it on social media.
There in the back, I've seen your hand up for a while. Okay. Sorry, go you, then you.
I'm really glad you called it there. My question was about politics. The fact of the matter is we don't have laws about the internet yet from Congress, because most of them, when the internet was being made, were like, oh, that's just a bunch of fat people in their basement. Right? And we don't have laws about the technology of yesterday. How are we supposed to get these guys to look at the technologies of tomorrow and to do it at a global scale? Because, even it's borderless. Like, if the technology is stopped here, but they make it over in, I don't know, the UK, like UK equities seem to allow to support you guys, right? And they do it there, like, everybody's just gonna move over across the pond. Like, what do you do to get politicians across the globe to create something to prevent basically the arts from going away to robots?
Well, Tim, I think that's something NAVA's doing right now.
This is something that's actively happening right now that NAVA's working with, along with all of the global voice acting associations. And this is what we're going to see in the EU AI Act that comes out that has a lot of what we're calling for here that people are asking for in a lot of these discussions is going to be in that transparency. It's going to be consent. It's going to be the ability to know where your voice is being used and how it's being used. That has the protections for voice are just currently now being added as of this week. There's very specific protections for voice that aren't in the EU AI Act that we've seen that are going to be going in there, hopefully by amendment or by other proposals that are going in. That's going to trickle down to the rest of the world if it's adopted on the scale that it's hopefully going to be adopted, which is across the EU and across Europe to put these into their national laws. Same way that we've seen the GDPR kind of adopted in some capacity globally. As far as the U.S. following suit, it's going to depend on if that's able to happen. But a lot of these companies who do work globally, if you work with a voice actor globally, then you're going to want to work in the laws that are going to cover you globally. And I think that hopefully we're going to see that trickle down into a very active change for the voice actors here.
Yeah. There in the back, yeah.
Hi, my name is Linsay. I'm from Temple of Geek, which is a fandom outlet.
Yeah.
Fans, cosplayers in particular, have been really supportive of this strike and the creators that make everything. But there's been some confusion on how we can best support. This may be a tertiary question, but a lot of casual hobbyist cosplayers want to know, is it okay to just cosplay a character from a struck company? And they want to know what is the top item, bottom line, how AS fans can support the strike, because we really do.
Yeah. Duncan.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, first of all, let me just say, really appreciate the question. There's been such an outpouring of support from fans, from the public, from the influencer and content creator community, among others, really standing up and taking a public position supporting the strike, and it is so important. And by the way, I can tell you, from having been out on picket lines every day, our members who are on those picket lines notice it, they appreciate it, it means everything to them. And so first of all, let me just start by saying thank you for that. As people know, we have a very strong rule about not promoting struck work, and that is a rule that our actors, our members are following. And the purpose of that is to make sure that every opportunity that the companies have to build revenue or to monetize these projects that have been done is shut down to the greatest extent possible. It's such a strict rule because we want this strike to be as short as possible, and anything that we do that weakens the strike or lessens that resolve tends to drag the strike out, make it last longer, and we don't want that. As far as individual cosplayers go, it is okay under our rules. Our committee has said it is okay for them to do their cosplay. My suggestion to them would be, if you are supportive of the strike, figure out a way to, because I know how creative cosplayers are, because I've been here many, many times, figure out a way to combine your support for the strike with your favorite cosplay, because then you are actually helping us send the message we're trying to send, which is that the community at large is united, supporting us in the demands that we're making, which are reasonable demands. You've heard the actors talking about them here, and having the support of all the fandoms would be amazing. So we hope that you'll do that.
I have a pitch, and you can take it or leave it.
Make that pitch, Ashley.
I would love to see some Fran Drescher cosplay. I would love to see some Adam Conover cosplay.
Yeah.
So if you can find a way to, like, I don't know, like, do your magic, I would just love to see it.
The nanny had some of the best outfits I've ever seen in television.
I mean, come on.
And she still does, by the way, I will say.
She still does. She still does.
Yeah.
Zeke, I think Zeke has something to add to that.
Follow-up question. When it comes to cosplayers, hobbyists versus influencers, a lot of influencers get invited to premieres, to big cosplay events that they put on. What should they do, whether you're a union member or not, whether you're a hobbyist or an influencer? If you get invited to a Struck Studios premiere, what do you do?
We talking about like the Paramount Plus fandom event that's happening?
Specifically, like the premieres in Hollywood.
The premieres in Hollywood.
Yeah, there have been all kinds of invites going out. Influencers, cosplayers, you know, and I know because I've talked to a number of them, they've received all kinds of invitations, include some to get paid, some to have travel expenses paid, some to have custom costumes made for them for those events. And a number of people have gone public with those invites and that they are declining them. And we've been trying to say, I've actually personally recorded TikTok videos and other videos to personally thank, no, I'm serious, to personally thank influencers and content creators who have done that for us, because it is a huge part of solidarity and of us making this strike as effective as possible for them to do that. And so many have gone public saying we've turned them down. You know, I'm sure there will be some who accept those offers. I think it's unfortunate. We're trying to really get the message out and encourage them not to do that. You know, we do have a rule that applies to people who aren't yet members of SAG-AFTRA, which is if you were basically scab, if you do struck work that our members aren't doing, then don't expect to ever be a member of SAG-AFTRA in the future. And I know some people don't care about that. Some of them, that's fine. But, you know, from our point of view, this is an existential fight that our members are engaged in, and we really need everyone's support to fight that battle.
Right here.
Can I answer?
Sorry. Zeke had something. That's right.
Yeah, I just want to speak to the cosplayers. Love what you love. Do what you do. This whole thing is popular because you love the art that we create. So we can't do this without you. We do this for you. And I think it's been said here that you can do what you do and still support us. Weave it into your cosplay. We want to see the best Duncan Crabtree-Ireland cosplay that you can possibly do.
That's frightening.
You know, you are creatives too, so use that creativity to the benefit of all of us.
Yeah. Sorry, I saw your hand up right there.
Yeah, I had a question. If you more specific, I've seen the thing about if you may one day be interested in joining SAG-AFTRA, don't promote struck work. In relation to the con, where you're covering the con, and most of the actors aren't here, and that's fine. But can you give us some specifics of things we would want to stay away from? We've been trying to be very careful.
So non-union actors who are going to be potentially working on struck projects, I think is what we're talking about, yeah?
Sure. I'm detecting in the question, maybe if you don't mind, I'll try to clarify. You mean like, for example, if you're here covering this convention and so you are in a sort of review-ish, sort of critical sort of way covering what's happening and giving a sort of a news take on it or a review take on it. Right. Spin on that. Yeah. Right. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is if we're talking about like news-ish type coverage or critical or review type coverage, that's not what we're viewing as promotional. But if you're talking about, you know, going out there and, you know, dressing in your Barbie cosplay and, you know, just rallying for everyone to go see the Barbie movie, that would be promotional. So it's really, that's the dividing line. So we're not, you know, we're not telling our journalist members, for example, that they can't go cover what's happening in, you know, in an entertainment journalism context. That's okay. So that's the dividing line. And I will just say, if there's a specific if you have a specific question, like there's something specific you're thinking about doing that you want to check, you can always email us at SAG-AFTRA@SAG-AFTRA.org, and we can give you a specific response to your unique situation.
I think, did you ask? No, you haven't gone yet. Yeah.
Sorry. So I've been, you know, kind of trying to write about this for a while. I'm sure a lot of people in this room have, and you guys obviously have put a lot of creative capital, I would imagine, into how best to represent yourselves and represent this issue. Is there a particular metaphor or analogy that you've been using to help explain this to people in a way that resonates, that strikes, that, no pun intended, that, you know, that I guess I'm interested in what that metaphor or analogy might be, whether it's specific to labor rights or AI in particular. That's my question.
I'm going to look at Tim or Zeke for this one.
Oh, I've got them.
Go for it.
Okay, I knew one of you would.
There's a philosophical difference between how the creators feel and how the employers feel. And it revolves around the concept of consent. There is active and there is passive consent. We, the creators, believe in active consent. You can't just do whatever you want. You can do what we tell you you can do with our name and likeness and our performance and work and what we give informed consent to do. Passive consent is I got to do everything except the singular things that you tell me I can't. And that is their approach. And we understand why they have that approach. It is because they don't want to get caught at a competitive disadvantage. But they're bargaining for a competitive disadvantage and a financial advantage. We're bargaining for our very existence. So we're not going to give passive consent. It's not like when a new technology occurs, you just get to use it until you abuse it, we claim it, and then we claw back the right. That doesn't work for us. Now, I spent 20 years in the United States Navy. I'm a retired military commander, so I'll use a military metaphor. We always talk in negotiations about, is this the hill you're willing to die on? Right? And we are at an inflection point in history right now. You can choose to fight and die on that hill, or you will be summarily executed there. That's the only choice you have.
Did I see a hand over
I was going to, can I add on that? Sorry, I just want to add on to
Tim,
that
yeah.
to kind of build off. It's not going to be as extreme as that. Dramatic. But,
we military people have a way with words.
We got it. Just kind of getting back to what Ashley and Cissy had said earlier, you know, is that what we can do, my thing is be informed. Educate yourself, because from the voice actor standpoint, we have been sending our audio files out for 20 years. We've been digitally sending our audio around the world for years. It's very easy to have been picked up and to be used. And we need to look and make sure we're educated now to put those contracts into place. If you don't have them, NAVA has supplied an AI writer for our people to download, our members to download, or anybody to download and put in their contracts to start protecting yourself now, because what we don't want to have happen is for your first job to be your last job. Mm-hmm. And that's very likely that's going to happen.
Yeah. Right there, yeah.
A bit left of centre. A lot of what's been talked about is talked about in the context of kind of negotiating new technology versus an income from the actors. Has there been any conversation around handling iconic deceased actors' voices? What protections exist? And I think, like we saw in Star Wars, they kind of went near that with Carrie Fisher. But someone like Kevin Conroy, who spent 30 years of his life voicing Batman, what protections currently exist? And is there any discussion about introducing protections for actors who have created libraries of voices over decades, passed away? Mm-hmm. And I mean, where does ownership reside? What is your organisation doing to not preserve, but to protect that from being abused? Because in a sense, you're not just talking about losing jobs to entirely artificial voices generated from certain sources. You're potentially also talking about losing jobs to AIs which have produced voices from libraries of deceased actors' voices that are culturally iconic.
I love a lot of actors, but I don't want to watch them forever. The right of publicity is not a federally standard right. It is dictated by the states, and so it's different everywhere. And employers would contend that once you die, the right of publicity becomes fair use. How would you guys feel for your kids if once you die, a company can come along and profit off of your likeness in any way that they want without the consent of your family? Now, there are states like New York and California where that is protected and moved down to the estate, the heirs, but that's not the same everywhere. So when we talk about, legislation, contractual protection, and understanding the technology, one of the legislative pieces there is a federal IP right in name and likeness. And so that's another thing that everyone can do to help. I mean, you vote with your vote, you vote with your dollars, you vote with your eyeballs. Our politicians, in theory, work for us. And so to get them to pass something like a federal IP right in name and likeness that is a transferable right that then protects the deceased's family from having their ancestors abused is very important.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, before we go on for that question, I think the other thing to directly to your point is, to the extent that those projects were done under union contracts, it is a mandatory subject of bargaining under federal labor law that those employers negotiate for anything like that type of use with the union. And so that is one of the reasons why AI is such a existential issue in the negotiations, not only film and television and streaming, but interactive and everywhere else, because what we're negotiating for now not only protects today into the future, but it also governs what kind of use will be made of things from history as well. And so this is our chance to make sure that the sort of nightmare scenario that you just described doesn't come to pass. And so between a combination of public policy, like Zeke just described, and collective bargaining, those are how we can address it. But I will point out, this is one of the reasons why, regardless of whether you're a member of the union, it is so essential to be working under union contracts, because that same protection doesn't apply to people who worked in non-union work where they signed their own individual contracts. And so in that case, unless they had the foresight to think 30 years down the road and imagine artificial intelligence coming to pass, they may not have put protective provisions into those contracts. So this is a real, very serious existential concern on the part of our members.
Well, and I think one thing to add to that, which is why you mentioned collective bargaining, is that if you are not doing this under a union contract, the onus is on you to find a lawyer you can afford to take on XYZ studio who has endless pockets of money to fight you on it.
Right, and who knows what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw it here.
Yeah.
Duncan and Cissy, totally get it. When it comes to voiceovers and protecting voiceover actors, you want to make sure things are solid with these companies so there isn't a duplication of, an actor's voice being used in a rival game or promotion. However, in regards to the fan mods, some of this has to do with piracy. A lot of this has to do with piracy. How are you going to combat it?
Well, I think that's why Zeke was referencing right of publicity. I mean, this issue in general, the AI issue, has to be addressed through a combination of things. Has to be addressed through collective bargaining, has to be addressed through public policy, has to be addressed through education of the public and fans as well, so that everybody is on the same page about, what is an appropriate, set of boundaries around the implementation of AI. And so that's how we're going to address that. And again, I think that we can find a path. I think there is a path to be found that allows for appropriate levels of that type of engagement, while taking Cissy's, I think, very well stated concerns about how that can be misused into account. Same thing. I mean, this is something that goes across all areas of actors. I mean, one of the areas where this has been at the forefront has been in deepfakes and the abuse of many of our more high-profile members in just egregious ways by people using deepfake technology. I won't even go into a description of them, but I think you all know what I mean. And there needs to be public policy boundaries set around this that can really constrain it, and I think there will be.
There was a question earlier about why politicians are going to care now. That's why.
Yeah.
Because there's the ease with which they can be deep faked coming up on a very important election. They care.